To be completely transparent, pre-recorded a segment last week about Colorado, and I was like, I could use this if a couple teams lose and Colorado really becomes relevant in the Big 12. Well, guess what, buddy? They're here. And given what my travel schedule has been the last 24 hours, it is, how you say, late. I think this is what I felt about Colorado a couple days ago, encapsulates how Colorado's power can continue. So I'm about to wax poetic about what Deion Sanders could do to possibly topple a BYU or topple other teams at the top of the Big 12. And this is what I said before Kansas State and Iowa State lost, but I believe it. The Buffs are in a good spot. Let's talk about them.
What's going on, Buff Nation? We've got a special treat for you here. We've got the Big 12 expert, the guy, the man, the myth, the legend. We got Drake Topple over there at Locked on Big 12. Drake, how's it going, my man?
Jay, always a pleasure. I'll be the first one to say it. I will start this off by saying that I certainly doubted Colorado, the Buffs, Deion Sanders early this season, preseason especially, and eating crow, foot is in my mouth, barely fits. This team has been special to watch. The brand of football they play currently and the character that both Deion and his team have shown this season is very impressive.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So this has been a season that's been a shocker for a lot of people. Not yours truly. My prediction was 9-3. And unfortunately, the games they lost are not the games that I picked. I didn't pick Nebraska and Kansas State. I picked UCF. I picked Oklahoma State. And I forgot the third one off the top of my head. But they're winning games that doesn't feel like they... Arizona. It was a road game against Arizona. That was the one I thought. And I was way off on that part. But I saw bowl game. I saw potential push for conference championship. But on the outside looking in, the perspective from the Big 12, what do you guys see out of this team that just jumps out to you?
I think the first word is dangerous. Colorado can beat anybody in the Big 12. And if you go back to that Kansas State game, they did beat Kansas State until they didn't anymore. They were right there in the thick of winning that game against a very good Chris Kleiman-led team. And since then, they've been unscathed. The dominating win against Arizona, beating a solid Cincinnati team, and down the stretch here, Texas Tech, Utah, Kansas, Oklahoma State. Colorado should be favored in all of those games. So when I use the word dangerous, it goes for all Big 12 teams, and it especially goes for these last four that are on their schedule, because I foresee Colorado winning each of these. And then dangerous nationally, too, not just from the Big 12 perspective. If you take a 10-2 Colorado team who's in the top 15 and say, look, there's just no way they make the college football playoff, you're dead wrong. Especially given that Colorado has so many eyeballs on their football season. The more they win, the more people watch, the more that viewership number goes up, the hotter they are for the college football playoff, because there are human being people, the actual like flesh, like us, Jay, who will put these teams in the college football playoff, and they're always looking at what's going to drive revenue. Colorado will drive revenue. Whether they go to the Big 12 championship and win it or finish 10-2 outside of Arlington, they've got a shot to play in the postseason in the big dance.
And I'm glad you said that. 10-2 is the number that we can say that Colorado's definitely aiming at. They're on a nice winning streak. And to wrap the season up, for them, the big game, you got Texas Tech next week. Then you've got Utah, Kansas, and Oklahoma State. When you look at that schedule down the stretch, how good do you think Colorado will fare in those games?
Yeah, I feel really good about the game against Utah, it being in Boulder, Utah floundering right now. And while Kansas has been improved and Texas Tech has shown bright spots, I still don't see those being an issue. And then you come back to Boulder to finish the season against Oklahoma State. While Utah, They were the preseason favorite. Their defense is still decent. And while Kansas has caught on a little bit, I just don't know if they can put up with the athletes of Colorado. I've yet to mention an actual player, whether it be Jimmy Horn Jr. to Shiloh Sanders to Shedeur Sanders, a Heisman quality quarterback, or Travis Hunter, the winner of the Heisman Trophy. Can those four schools put up with the list of athletes that Colorado has thrown out there? I don't think so right now. And the offensive line is not elite. The offensive line is not great. The offensive line is developed into good. They continue to improve week in and week out. And guess what? The defensive front is doing the same thing. We saw that on full display against Arizona and Noah Fafita with the amount of times that Colorado spent in the backfield in that game a couple of weeks ago. With that, with the two fronts playing well, the two fronts improving, and the amount of star cast on both sides of the ball, the next four games for Colorado, the Buffs should be favored in each of them and will likely win each of them.
The fascinating thing behind that is as you mentioned, the offensive line. We're talking to Drake Topple over there at Locked On Big 12. Check him out. Link is in the description below. Is that the offensive line, you said, they're not great, but they're growing together.
Yeah.
This is a team that has been built out of the transfer portal. 2 straight seasons, Colorado has led the country in transfers. And so this has been basically everybody's, I guess the best way to say it, guinea pig, to see if you can literally live out of the portal. Right now, the class is not huge. How does that fare in comparison to the other Big 12 teams? Do you see other teams possibly trying to mimic this and try to see if they can get the success that Colorado's having?
Well, it's crazy, Jay, that I used it as a derogatory statement a while ago that this is AAU football, that we can just kind of take the roster and flip it over. But that's what Colorado is doing, is they're flipping a roster over year and bringing in the best football team on paper in the Big 12, the most 4 stars, the most 5 stars. And when it clicks, with or without continuity, by the way, because when you replace your entire offensive line, there is no continuity. They were all playing together for the first time, and that usually is not a recipe for success in college football. It has been for the Buffs, and it proves that schools who have the coach that's willing to do this, a coach that's willing to do this, or the resources to do so, will go out and not necessarily buy a team, but build a team. That's what Colorado has done. Now, will Kansas State ever do that? Will Iowa State ever do that? I don't see it. I don't think they have that style of coach or those resources, and they can take the corn-fed, homegrown boys and play a fifth-year senior out there who is going to bring absolute dog to the table. But Colorado says, hey, you've got that fifth-year senior you developed. We've got a 5-star who played 3 years at a different school. They developed them. We're going to enter them into our culture and win with that guy because he's already better than yours, and that's dangerous.
Yeah, it is. And it's just wild that they were able to have so many transfers and, like I said, see this type of success. It's not something we've ever seen before so far, and they may have changed the game.
Yeah.
The defense here at Colorado has been masterful, especially in the second half. Now, some games they do start slow, but then the second half they turn it up. Arizona, they gave up a touchdown early, didn't give up a single score again. In the second half of Cincinnati, they gave up 10 points of the 23. They were able to really start shutting things down. Same thing with UCF, gave up most of the points in the first half, 7 points in the second. The team seems like it starts to wind itself up. Have we seen the peak of Colorado football, or do you think that they've got another gear?
I don't think we've seen the peak, and that goes back to the way the Buffs have been able to get better and better week in and week out. Look at that Baylor game, and that was kind of a segue of offensively, Colorado wasn't good against Nebraska. They weren't very good against Colorado State. They weren't to their full potential against Colorado State. They weren't to that full potential against Baylor, but you could tell week by week they were getting better, and then bam, they completely exploded against UCF. The defense was so good against Kansas State, and they almost closed that game out for a win. Then Arizona, the culmination of what Colorado can be, and I think what they showed you against Cincinnati is as they start to play more competitive, better football teams, they are developing a roster that's better week in and week out, which is what makes it so dangerous for their next 4 opponents. What makes Colorado so dangerous, that is, for their next 4 opponents. And Jay, defensively right now, analytically, they improve week in and week out. And I go to collegefootballinsiders.com every week and see how teams are developing those categories. Colorado has the number 21 pass defense in America, efficiency-wise. Their EPA against the pass, 21 in America. That, in our industry, Jay, is what we call good.
It's good, and that's what matters. And with the way the schedule is lining up, Colorado has a challenge. They have a challenge here that we've got to talk about. Can they make it to the Big 12 championship game? Right now, the way Colorado's schedule is set up, we've talked about their next games, Texas Tech, Utah, Kansas, and then Oklahoma State. 2 road, 2 home games, perfect. But they're battling against a Kansas State team who has 1 loss in conference. You're dealing with BYU and Iowa State, who are undefeated. Now, luckily, Kansas State does play Iowa State at the end of the season. Yeah. But BYU's schedule does not really line up against anyone that we actually think they can lose to. Drake, tell me, what is the path for Colorado to get to the Big 12 championship?
Well, it's obviously going to be tough, Jay, because you don't hold that future in your own hands. BYU and Iowa State, as long as they win out, will be in the Big 12 championship game. So this is the odd part of that year where you as a football program not only root for yourself to win every game, but somebody else to go upset either BYU or Iowa State and give the Buffs an opportunity to play in the Big 12 championship, because then we don't have to talk about does 10-2 Colorado have an outside shot? Is 10-2 Colorado a bubble team? Instead, we're saying, hey, Colorado's in the Big 12 championship. They can go win it in Arlington and be a lock for the college football playoff. So not only do you have to win all 4 games that are left on your schedule, you've got to hope that Iowa State drops a couple, or that BYU drops a couple, and Kansas State drops 1 or 2 in this game, in this season down the line. I don't know if that's going to happen. It lines up fairly favorably for BYU, and then if Kansas State goes out and beats Iowa State, you're looking at BYU, Kansas State in the Big 12 championship. Colorado's still stuck at 10-2 and outside looking in, but I've been here before as a fan of the Baylor Bears. When I was in college at Baylor a few years back, they were counting on Oklahoma State to upset Oklahoma in the Bedlam game. Otherwise, Baylor was held out of the Big 12 championship. There are fan bases every year who go into the last 2 weeks of the season rooting for someone to lose. And every now and then it works out in your favor.
That's true. I mean, I've seen it in numerous occasions that, like you said, a team is rooting for somebody else to lose because they didn't take care of the business regular season like they should have to beat that team to keep themselves in there. They needed one more team to knock a team off for them. And
Jay, I mean, if you play it today, Colorado, Nebraska, I think the Buffs win that game by 10, 14 points. We always talk in college football about the development of a team. We go back to week 2, and we say, yeah, so-and-so lost in week 2, but they're a different football team today. They always say about Notre Dame. Notre Dame's a different football team than they were when they played Northern Illinois. That's the same for Colorado. And that loss to Kansas State, if they play again, Kansas State might win. I mean, that's a very good, a juggernaut of a Kansas State team. I think K-State might win 6 out of 10 times, but the Buffs have as good a shot as anybody if they get a rematch in the Big 12 championship game. And I go back to Nebraska. Had they beaten Nebraska, finish 11-1 with that loss to Kansas State still on their docket, they're definitely in the college football playoff. That's the one I want back, that Nebraska game, even more so than Kansas State.
I can totally see that. And I mean, the one thing I can give to Colorado in that Kansas State game, though, is they lost on the last throw of the game for the most part. So if the defense, let's put it this way. If Travis Hunter plays in that game, do they actually get that deep pass off? And do they actually score there, taking advantage of the younger corners? I mean, even though Colton Hood basically had a pick six in his hands, besides the grass grabbed his ankle and knocked him to the ground. But they did score after that. And then the next play, Kansas State scores. So I guess the question is, if you have Travis Hunter, do you get it?
I say this. When I give you that 6 out of 10 number, that's directly from the analytics. Kansas State would win this game on paper 29-27. If you run it through the computer and the way the efficiencies stack up, which is stunning to me. They played again 10 times, 20 times. Colorado is right in the middle of that football game. It's a 50-50 coin flip, and that says a lot about Deion Sanders' development of this team.
I can totally see that. I can definitely see that.
Oh, there, fellas. I'm going to pop in and tell you about FanDuel. FanDuel's America's #1 sportsbook. It is. It is. And right now I can go to FanDuel and say, FanDuel, I think that the, Los Angeles Rams will win a game against the Seattle, what do they call the Seahawks? That's what they're calling them nowadays. And they'll do it in Seattle. Put money on it, and I win. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Bet $5. Hey, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. That's right, $150 in bonus bets if you win. You can even bet live. That's right, live bets in the middle of a game. Check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the place where you place your bets. FanDuel.com to join today. $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
We're hanging out with Drake Toll from Locked on Big 12. Thank you, Drake, for pulling up with us today. Let's talk about Travis Hunter. Some of these Colorado players that we've seen. This is a good topic for the day.
Yeah.
Travis Hunter has been eating. First player in Big 12 history to win Offensive Player of the Week and Defensive Player of the Week in the same season. He just recently got Offensive Player of the Week because of his great performance against Cincinnati. Drake, do you think there's a chance in one of these last 4 games that Travis Hunter can get offense and defensive player of the week in the same week.
Yeah, how crazy is it that we're talking about a Heisman Trophy race that features Cam Ward, Dylan Gabriel, Ashton Jonty, Cade Klubnik, Carson Beck, Jackson Dart, Garrett Nussmeier. The last time I checked, Jay, every single one of those players that I just named have played one side of the football the entire season. We've got a guy in the Big 12, a guy from Colorado, that's playing both sides of the ball and winning Conference Player of the Week on both sides of the ball and doing something that I'm not sure any major analyst projected, and that's becoming a wide receiver one option for Colorado. For me in the preseason, Jimmy Horn Jr., that was the guy. Shedeur to Jimmy Horn Jr., we're not going to overwork Travis Hunter, who is an elite defensive back, but instead he's gotten to step into a role where he can be that wide receiver one at any given point in time. And the durability, sure, he's been banged up a bit, but it's the fact that he's right back there the next week. Even if he's not 100%, he's still taking snaps, typically on both sides of the ball, and becoming an instant impact playmaker. No matter who Colorado plays, there isn't a Heisman race. There's one player who's doing something no one else in college football has done at this level in decades. His name is Travis Hunter, and he's the winner of the Heisman Trophy this season and puts Colorado in a position to win any game they play, whether that's against Notre Dame, Ohio State, Alabama, or any Big 12 team. When you got a player at that elite of a level, you've at least got a shot.
So why is it that Shedeur Sanders isn't in the Heisman Trophy conversation? He's like 6th in college football in passing yards, 3rd in touchdowns, and he's, the straw that, stirs the drink there for Colorado. You can tell that the offense completely runs through him. The run game hasn't been the greatest, so everything has been leaning on his shoulders, but overall, he's not really even being considered for it. Is Travis Hunter hurting Shedeur Sanders' bid for Heisman Trophy?
Yeah, it's very tough to have two guys on the same team that get the same level of hype in the matter of a season. And I've got to be honest with you, Jay. This is the way the Big 12 goes to an extent. If Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders were in the SEC, no brainer. They're both in the top 5. No brainer, they're both in the top 5. The Big 12 just doesn't get the level of exposure that the Southeastern Conference does or the level of exposure that the Big 10 does. And sometimes that's warranted, but here it's hurting one of the best players in college football. So we keep saying, oh, wow, Shedeur Sanders is a Heisman caliber quarterback. He should be in the Heisman running without a doubt right now, especially in conference where he's completing 75.4% of his passes, despite still being under pressure. He's been sacked 25 times. The kid's taking hits. Offensive line's getting better. It's still not there yet. Shedeur Sanders has put up with some mean defenses. I go back to that Baylor game where they couldn't keep the Bears out of the backfield, and Shedeur still went and won you the football game and still has such a great stat line in conference play. He's got to be in the I just don't get how the kid can't be in New York if he continues on this trajectory the rest of the way and puts his team at least in the conversation of a playoff bid.
Yeah, and that's a good segue into the playoffs fully. Now we know that Colorado is, we talked about this before, there's a good chance they're on the outside looking in when it comes to the Big 12 championship game. Totally understand that. That happens. And the way that the playoffs are set, it really does feel like that the first 8 spots are going to be given to the Power 4 playoff, the champion, conference champion, and the runner-up. It feels like that's how it's going to line up. So from there, you got 4 at-larges. You're going to give one to Notre Dame. We know that. So that gives you 3. You got to give it to a G6, I guess they're called now. Yeah. You got to give it to their highest-ranked dude. That leaves 2 spots left in the at-large bid. Can Colorado make an argument to get in for one of those last 2 spots over maybe another Big Ten team or another SEC team? Can they make an argument if they finish this year 10-2?
Yeah, I have heard that from multiple analysts that 10-2 Colorado will likely get in over a 10-2 SEC team. Barrett Salee said that on my show this week on Locked On Big 12. Reason being, they won't let 5 SEC teams in. They won't let 5 in this year because that conference has been down and beaten itself up. And then from the standpoint of where Colorado sits in the Big 12, if Kansas State goes 11-1 to the Big 12 championship, BYU goes 12-0, and you see Kansas State beat BYU in Arlington, avenge their loss in Provo. Work with me here. Now we're looking at 12-1 Kansas State, 12-1 BYU. I point at Colorado and say, hey, The only two teams they lost to, top 25 at the time, Nebraska, and a Kansas State team was in the college football playoff. I think that 10-2 Colorado team gets in over 11-1 Iowa State because, as we talked about, this is a human-led game. These college football playoff committee members are looking at the resources of a school, how many eyeballs will be on the CFP, and their jobs are directly affected by how successful this 12-team playoff is. With that in mind, holding Colorado out if they're a 10-win regular season team is going to be tough to do.
Yeah, and honestly, as you laid it out so eloquently, that's probably one of the dumbest things you could possibly do, right? It's to pass on the opportunity of putting a Colorado team into the playoffs that's 10-2 and only lost to, one ranked team and the other one that has been up and down throughout the season. Yeah, there is a compelling argument. The question's going to be, would they really put them in over an 11-1 Iowa State or an 11-1 BYU for the eyeballs, which I can see the political aspect of it. Those guys will bring – we all know Buffs fans and Buffs Nation are the fan base that people watch Colorado because they love Prime in Colorado, or they watch Colorado because they hate Prime and they want to see them fail. So there's probably more hate watchers for Colorado than there is any other team in the country today.
No doubt.
And now that they're bowl eligible, it really threw a wrench in a lot of their talk tracks of, they probably won't even make it to a bowl game this year. They're going 4-8 again. And look at this, 6-2 already. And honestly, with the perfect beeline to the championship. So, Drake, you got to give me your prediction on this. Do you think Colorado finishes this season 10-2? Can they sweep these final 4 games against a reeling Texas Tech who's lost, the last 2 to 3 games?
Yeah.
Utah, who fired their offensive coordinator. Kansas, who ever since Koltonicky left, they don't look like the same Kansas team. And they're also not playing in Lawrence. They're playing at Arrowhead. So it's probably really weird for them. And then Oklahoma State, who has been probably the biggest dumpster fire in Big 12 history because they bring back the most players outside Iowa State, and they suck. Can Colorado close it out?
20-22 starters for Oklahoma State, and they're terrible, coming back from a 10-win team. Jay, I'll call it. Colorado plays 3 of these 4 who are below 500 in the Big 12, and the Buffs win all 4, including that game against Texas Tech, because the Red Raiders are reeling 10-2, and it makes it very hard for the committee to not at least look at the Buffs and Deion Sanders and what a smashing success this year was in Boulder. I can only hope, and I do think it will be the case, that Deion comes back and Colorado is a force to be reckoned with in 2025 as well.
I love to hear it. Drake, thank you so much for joining us. This is Drake Toll from Locked On Big 12. Let the people know where they can find you, where you at on social media, and all of that real quick.
Yeah, at Drake C. Toll on Twitter, at LO Big 12 on Twitter as well, and then wherever you find your podcasts, at Locked On Big 12. Pull it up on the old YouTube, and you'll find a ton of Colorado content from this week as the Buffs, they're contenders. We're going to buy Deion Sanders and company. Thank you, Jay.
Thanks for joining us.
That was fun. Got to wax poetic about Deion Sanders. I believe all of it. I owe the Buffs an apology eternally. Tomorrow there will be more Utah BYU this week on Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.